I inherited a wasteland and accidentally built a civilization. After dying from overwork, a man wakes up inside his favorite kingdom-building novel. Not as the protagonist, not as the villain, but as Cedric Valmont, the forgotten 12th son of Duke Valmont. Cedric remembers exactly how the story ends. The succession war among his 11 brothers destroys the duchy. Every son is either murdered, poisoned, or executed. Including Cedric. He has no intention of becoming another casualty. So, before the succession begins, he kneels before his father with one request. "Father, I don't want the title. I only want a piece of land." His brothers laugh. The Duke, amused, grants him the family's most worthless territory. The Ashfall Wasteland. A barren region covered in black soil, abandoned villages, monster nests, and endless ruins. Everyone believes Cedric has exiled himself. Perfect. His plan is simple. Stay away from politics. Farm. Make enough money to retire peacefully. Never return to the capital. Unfortunately, the worthless wasteland hides ancient rivers underground. The ruined city contains lost technology. Rare magical crops grow only in its cursed soil. And the monsters everyone fears are surprisingly useful workers once properly fed. One business becomes 10. 10 villages become a town. The town becomes a city. Merchants arrive. Scholars immigrate. Adventurers settle down. Factories appear. Academies are built. Roads connect nations. Before Cedric realizes it, the wasteland he wanted for retirement has become the richest civilization on the continent. Now every kingdom wants an alliance. Every noble wants his favor. Even his father regrets giving away the land. Cedric only sighs. Why is retirement so difficult? Chapter 1. A fate written in blood. Cold. That was the first thing Cedric Valmont felt. The luxurious silk sheets, the faint scent of expensive incense, and the warmth of the morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows all told him he was no longer lying on the hard floor of his tiny apartment. "I'm alive." He slowly opened his eyes. An ornate ceiling decorated with golden carvings greeted him. His heart skipped a beat. No. He shot upright, staring at his hands. They were younger. Smooth. Without the calluses from years of office work. Without the scars from countless sleepless nights. He rushed toward the large mirror standing near the bed. Looking back at him was a handsome young man with dark brown hair, deep blue eyes, and the unmistakable appearance of an 18-year-old noble. Cedric Valmont. The 12th son of Duke Valmont. You've got to be kidding me. His legs weakened as memories flooded into his mind. This wasn't his world. It was the world of the Crown of Thorns, a kingdom fantasy novel he had read over and over again. Not once. Not twice. More than 20 times. Every battle. Every betrayal. Every ending. He knew them all. And the body he now occupied wasn't the protagonist. Wasn't the villain. He was barely a supporting character. A forgotten noble who appeared only a handful of times before dying in the Valmont succession war. Cedric let out a long sigh. I finally escaped death from overwork. Only to be reborn into another death flag. In the original story, Duke Valmont ruled one of the largest duchies in the kingdom. Power, wealth, influence, everything a noble desired. But the Duke had 12 sons. When the old Duke's health began to fail, the brothers turned against one another. Poisonings. Assassinations, false accusations, civil war. The once proud Valmont family destroyed itself from within. And Cedric, he wasn't even important enough to have an epic death. He simply became collateral damage. Killed while trying to flee the capital. His death occupied less than a single page. Not this time. Cedric clenched his fists. I already died once. I refuse to die again. Knock, knock. My lord. A gentle voice came from outside the room. May I enter? Cedric recognized it immediately. Elena, his personal maid, one of the few people who genuinely cared about him. In the novel, she died protecting Cedric. His expression darkened. Another death. Another pointless sacrifice. No, I'll change the two. Come in. The door slowly opened. A young woman with chestnut-colored hair entered, carrying a silver tray with breakfast. She smiled warmly. Good morning, young master. You seem to have woken earlier than usual. Cedric quietly observed her. Alive, healthy, smiling. A smile naturally formed on his face. Good morning. Elena blinked. Young master. Is something wrong? You've never smiled first thing in the morning before. Cedric coughed awkwardly. I just had a strange dream. I see. She placed breakfast on the table. The Duke has requested all 12 young masters to attend today's family meeting. Cedric froze. Family meeting. His memories immediately connected the dots. This meeting, it was the beginning. The old Duke would soon announce preparations for choosing his successor. The succession war hadn't started yet. But today was the first domino. Cedric closed his eyes. He knew exactly what happened afterward. His older brothers would begin forming factions. Buying loyalty. Gathering knights. Eliminating rivals. Everyone who remained within the Valmont estate would eventually become involved. Including him. Unless. A thought suddenly appeared. Wait, why should I stay? The title. He didn't want it. Power. Absolutely not. Politics. Disgusting. He had already spent one lifetime working himself to death chasing success. He wasn't about to do it again. What did he really want? A quiet house. Fresh air. A small farm. Good food. Enough money to live comfortably. No meetings. No conspiracies. No succession war. Just peace. His eyes slowly widened. That's it. I'll leave. Elena tilted her head. My lord. Cedric stood before the window overlooking the vast Valmont estate. A smile gradually spread across his face. If I remember correctly, there is one territory no one wants. A barren wasteland. Ashfall. Worthless. Abandoned. The laughingstock of the duchy. To everyone else, it was exile. To Cedric, it was freedom. He chuckled softly. My brothers can fight over the duchy. They can keep the title. They can even keep the headaches. I'll take the wasteland. Elena stared in complete confusion. Young master. Cedric turned toward her with a bright smile unlike anything she had ever seen. For the first time in my life, I have a retirement plan. Outside the mansion, the bells of House Valmont echoed across the estate, calling the 12 sons to the family meeting that would determine the future of the duchy. For Cedric, it would determine something far more important. His chance to escape death, and the beginning of a peaceful life in the most worthless land on the continent. Or so he believed. Chapter 2. I don't want the duchy. The grand conference hall of House Valmont was filled with an oppressive silence. 12 young nobles stood in 2 orderly rows before the head of the room. Each of them was a son of the most powerful duke in the kingdom. Each dreamed of becoming the next Duke Valmont. Except one. Cedric yawned inwardly. Can we finish this quickly? I have retirement plans to make. At the far end of the hall sat Duke Roland Valmont. Even in his 60s, the Duke possessed an overwhelming presence. His silver hair, stern face, and piercing golden eyes were enough to silence the entire room. Around him stood the duchies. Ministers, generals, knights, and senior retainers. This was not merely a family gathering. It was the beginning of the succession. The Duke slowly rose. You all know why I summoned you. The Valmont duchy has stood for over 400 years. One day, one of you will inherit it. Every brother straightened with excitement. Cedric, however, stared absent-mindedly at the ceiling. Yep, this is exactly how it started in the novel. In 2 years, brother Leonard poisons brother Victor. Then brother Marcus frames brother Adrian. By the 3rd year, half of them are dead. Hard pass. The Duke continued. Today, each of you may state your ambitions. The future of House Valmont depends upon your resolve. The eldest son stepped forward. I shall dedicate my life to becoming a worthy successor. Another declared, I will expand our military and increase our territory. A third proudly proclaimed, I shall bring unmatched glory to House Valmont. One after another, the brothers delivered passionate speeches. Cedric silently counted the future corpses. 1, 2, 3, 4. When the 11th son finished speaking, the Duke finally looked toward the youngest. Cedric, what is your ambition? Every eye in the hall turned toward him. The ministers whispered among themselves. The youngest son had always remained quiet. Few expected much from him. Cedric calmly stepped forward. He bowed respectfully. Father, I have no desire to inherit the duchy. The hall instantly fell silent. What? Several brothers blinked. One minister nearly dropped his documents. The Duke narrowed his eyes. Explain. Cedric spoke honestly. I believe my elder brothers are far more qualified. I have neither the desire nor the talent to compete with them. That's a lie. I just don't want to get murdered. I wish to withdraw from the succession. Murmurs spread throughout the hall. His second brother laughed loudly. So the little brother finally knows his place. Another sneered. How pathetic. Coward. Cedric ignored them. Call me whatever you like. Cowards usually live longer. The Duke raised a hand, silencing everyone. If you refuse the succession, what do you seek instead? Cedric took a deep breath. Here came the most important sentence of his second life. I ask only for land. Confused looks spread across the room. A modest territory. Far from the capital. I wish to govern it peacefully and make my own living. One minister frowned. Young master, you would abandon the greatest inheritance in the kingdom. For a small estate. Cedric smiled. Yes. His brothers looked at him as though he had gone insane. The eldest brother folded his arms. How disappointing. I expected at least some ambition. Cedric almost laughed. You can keep the ambition. I'll keep my life. The Duke remained expressionless. What kind of territory do you desire? Cedric answered immediately. The Ashfall Wasteland. Silence. Complete silence. Even the servants looked stunned. One noble almost choked. The Ashfall Wasteland. The cursed territory. The abandoned frontier. His fourth brother burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Have you lost your mind? That place produces nothing but weeds and monsters. Another added. Even peasants refuse to live there. Cedric nodded happily. Exactly. The brothers stared at him. Exactly. It is quiet. It is far from politics. It has plenty of open land. It is perfect. Perfect for retirement. Even Duke Roland looked genuinely surprised for the first time. You understand what you are requesting. That territory has not produced taxes in decades. I understand. It is nearly bankrupt. I understand. It is dangerous. I understand. You may never recover your investment. Cedric smiled even wider. I still want it. The Duke studied his youngest son for a long moment. Those sharp golden eyes seemed capable of seeing through anyone. Yet Cedric's expression never changed. Finally, a faint smile appeared on the Duke's lips. Very well. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. Cedric Valmont. From this day forward, you relinquish all rights to the succession of House Valmont. In return, I grant you the Ashfall Wasteland. And everything within its borders. The Duke's seal struck the document with a loud thud. The decision was final. Cedric bowed deeply. Thank you, father. His brothers watched him with pity. To them, Cedric had thrown away unimaginable wealth. To Cedric, he had just purchased his freedom. As the meeting concluded, the ministers quietly shook their heads. What a foolish young lord. He'll return within a year. The wasteland will break him. Cedric walked out of the grand hall without looking back. The sunlight outside felt brighter than ever. He stretched his arms with a satisfied smile. No succession. No politics. No assassination attempts. Now, I just have to turn a bankrupt wasteland into a place rich enough for retirement. He suddenly stopped walking. Wait. He scratched his head. I don't actually know how much money retirement needs in this world. After a moment of silence, he sighed. Guess I'll just make as much money as possible. Far behind him, Duke Roland watched his youngest son leave through the palace window. The old Duke quietly murmured to himself. Of all my sons, perhaps the one who desired the least, understood the value of peace the most. Neither father nor son realized it. That single decision would one day change the fate of the entire continent. Chapter 3, The Ashfall Wasteland. 3 days later, the courtyard of House Valmont bustled with activity. Servants hurried back and forth carrying crates, barrels, furniture, books, farming tools, and supplies onto a modest convoy of wagons. Compared to the grand departures of Cedric's older brothers, who often traveled with hundreds of knights and luxurious carriages, his procession looked almost laughably small. 1 carriage, 4 supply wagons, 20 soldiers, 10 servants, 5 maids, a single steward, that was all. Cedric looked over the list and smiled. Perfect. His elderly steward, Alfred, blinked. Perfect, young master. Cedric nodded. We're not going to war. We're going to retire. Alfred didn't know how to respond. Retire. The young master had only turned 18. Most nobles his age dreamed of glory. His master dreamed of gardening. Inside the mansion, the 11 older brothers had gathered to watch Cedric's departure. Leonard, the eldest, crossed his arms. I'll give him 6 months. Marcus chuckled. 3. Victor laughed. I doubt he'll even survive the journey. Another added. Monsters will probably eat him before winter. The room erupted with laughter. None of them believed Ashfall could be saved. Cedric merely waved cheerfully. Take care, everyone. I hope you all stay healthy. The brothers exchanged strange looks. Why does it sound like he's saying goodbye forever? Cedric smiled inwardly. Because I am. Enjoy your succession war. I'm never coming back. As the convoy rolled toward the enormous gates of Valmont Castle, Cedric glanced behind him one final time. The towering fortress dominated the skyline. Magnificent, powerful, beautiful, and destined to become a battlefield soaked in blood. The next time I see this place, half of you will already be dead. He silently wished none of that would affect him. The gates slowly opened. For the first time in both his lives, Cedric left the capital without any regrets. The journey toward Ashfall took nearly 2 weeks. The further they traveled, the worse the roads became. Stone roads turned into dirt paths. Bustling towns became quiet villages. Eventually, even the villages disappeared. The scenery changed dramatically. Green forests gradually gave way to blackened plains. Dead trees stretched toward the gray sky. Ash drifted across the wind like snow. No birds sang. No livestock grazed. Only silence remained. One of the young soldiers swallowed nervously. So, this is Ashfall. Another whispered. It looks cursed. Alfred quietly nodded. The volcanic eruption 2 centuries ago buried most of the region beneath ash. Many believed the land could never recover. Cedric stepped down from the carriage. Crunch. Black soil crumbled beneath his boots. He crouched and picked up a handful. The soldiers watched curiously. Cedric rubbed the soil between his fingers. Rich, soft, full of minerals. His eyes widened. Wait, this isn't dead soil. This is volcanic soil. In his previous life, he had read about volcanic farmland. Some of the richest agricultural regions on Earth were formed from volcanic ash. The problem wasn't the soil. It was that nobody knew how to cultivate it properly. Cedric almost laughed. Everyone thinks this place is worthless. They're standing on treasure. He looked toward the endless plains stretching beyond the horizon. A slow grin spread across his face. This place is going to make me rich. The others looked at him with concern. The captain quietly whispered to Alfred. Has the young master lost his mind? Alfred sighed. I honestly don't know anymore. Several hours later, the convoy finally reached Ashfall village. Or rather, what remained of it. Half the houses had collapsed. The wooden fences had rotted away. The village well had dried up. Children wearing patched clothes watched silently from broken windows. Old men sat motionless outside abandoned homes. No laughter. No conversations. No hope. A weathered elderly man slowly approached the convoy. His clothes were faded. His face was deeply wrinkled. He bowed with trembling knees. Welcome, Lord. Cedric looked around. How many people still live here? The old man lowered his head. Once, there were nearly 3,000. Now, less than 300. Cedric's smile disappeared. 3,000. Reduced to 300. This was far worse than the novel had described. He continued walking through the village. Everywhere he looked, broken roofs, abandoned farms, collapsed barns, unused fields. Even the roads had almost disappeared beneath weeds. Children stared at him with hollow eyes. One little girl quietly hid behind her mother's skirt. The sight tightened Cedric's chest. How long have they lived like this? The village chief hesitated before speaking. My lord, if you came to collect taxes, I'm afraid we have nothing left. Cedric stopped walking. Taxes. The chief lowered his head in shame. We're sorry. We truly have nothing. Silence filled the village. Everyone looked down, expecting anger, expecting punishment. Instead, Cedric simply smiled. Who said anything about taxes? The villagers looked up in confusion. Cedric folded the tax ledger shut. Starting today, I won't collect a single coin. The entire village froze. What? Cedric continued calmly. Your children need food. Your homes need repairs. The fields need restoring. If I take taxes now, what exactly am I taxing? No one answered. There is nothing left to take. He handed the unopened ledger back to Alfred. Forget taxes. We're going to rebuild first. The old village chief suddenly burst into tears. He had served 6 different governors over the years. Every one of them had demanded payment. Not one had offered help. Cedric looked across the ruined settlement. There was certainly a lot of work ahead. But instead of feeling discouraged, he felt strangely excited. No politics. No scheming nobles. No assassins lurking behind every corner. Just land, people, and countless problems waiting to be solved. He smiled brightly. This is exactly the peaceful life I wanted. Far beyond the village, hidden beneath layers of volcanic ash, ancient stone ruins slept in silence. And deep below the earth, crystal clear underground rivers flowed endlessly, waiting for someone to uncover the true value of the Ashfall Wasteland. Chapter 4. Leaving the capital. The morning after Cedric officially took possession of the Ashfall Wasteland, the small lord's manor buzzed with activity. Unlike the luxurious residence he had occupied in the Duke's castle, the manor was nearly empty. Most of the servants had already transferred to his elder brothers, believing Cedric's future was hopeless. Only a handful remained. Alfred, his loyal steward, Elena and 4 other maids, Captain Gareth and 20 knights, 10 servants. That was the entirety of House Ashfall. Cedric looked around the nearly empty manor and smiled. This is nice. Alfred stared at him. Young master, are you certain? Cedric tilted his head. Certain about what? The Ashfall Wasteland. The succession. Leaving everything behind. Cedric laughed. I've never been more certain. He glanced out the window toward the magnificent Valmont castle rising above the capital. It looks beautiful. From very far away. Inside the castle, the 11 brothers had already begun gathering supporters. Knights pledged loyalty. Nobles exchanged secret letters. Merchants offered investments. Rumors spread through every corridor. Cedric shook his head. It has already started. The novel didn't exaggerate. The succession war begins long before the first sword is drawn. He silently thanked himself for leaving. A knock echoed through the room. Come in. Captain Gareth entered and saluted. My lord, the convoy is ready. Cedric nodded. Excellent. What did we manage to bring? Gareth unfolded a list. 300 sacks of grain. Various farming tools. Seeds. Medical herbs. Blacksmith equipment. Carpentry tools. Construction supplies. Cedric smiled. Perfect. Gareth hesitated. No expensive furniture. No decorative statues. No paintings. Cedric blinked. Why would I bring those? Everyone looked confused. Cedric pointed toward the wagons. Food, tools, medicine. Those make money. Statues don't. Alfred quietly muttered. He truly thinks like a merchant. Cedric corrected him. No, I think like someone who wants to retire comfortably. The maids loaded the final luggage. Elena frowned. Young master, shouldn't we bring your noble wardrobe? Cedric looked at the enormous collection of embroidered coats. How many are there? 57. Quote. Cedric rubbed his forehead. I'll keep 5. 5. The rest can stay. But they're worth a fortune. Cedric shrugged. I can't farm while wearing gold embroidery. The maids exchanged helpless looks. Their young master was unlike any noble they had ever served. Before departure, Cedric visited one final place. The family cemetery. Rows upon rows of marble monuments stretched across the hill. Generations of House Valmont rested there. He quietly stood before an empty plot reserved for him. In the original novel, his name would eventually be engraved here. Age, 21. Cause of death, killed during the Valmont succession war. Cedric looked at the empty stone for a long moment. Then smiled. Sorry, you'll have to stay empty. I plan on living until I'm an old man. He gently brushed away a fallen leaf before turning around. He never looked back. Outside the capital gates, the convoy finally assembled. Citizens whispered among themselves. Is that the 12th young master? I heard he gave up the succession. What a waste. They say he's moving to Ashfall. The cursed wasteland. Poor man. Cedric waved cheerfully to everyone. Have a nice day. The crowd looked bewildered. Why does he look happy? The heavy gates of the capital slowly opened. For the first time in 18 years, Cedric officially left his home. The massive walls disappeared behind them as the convoy rolled onto the kingdom's main highway. Cedric leaned back comfortably inside the carriage. Freedom. Alfred smiled faintly. You seem relieved. I am. No meetings. No noble banquets. No political games. No brothers trying to outsmart one another. He stretched lazily. I finally get to live. Elena couldn't help asking. My lord, what exactly do you plan to do in Ashfall? Cedric answered without hesitation. Sleep. Everyone blinked. Sleep. After that, eat. Then plant vegetables. Raise chickens. Maybe fish. And if there's still time, I'll make enough money that I never have to worry about finances again. Captain Gareth scratched his head. That's your grand ambition. Cedric nodded proudly. Exactly. The soldiers exchanged puzzled glances. Most nobles dreamed of becoming kings. Their lord dreamed of raising chickens. As the convoy traveled farther from the capital, the elegant stone roads gradually gave way to rougher paths. Bustling towns became quiet villages. Noble estates became simple farms. Cedric opened the carriage window, letting the fresh countryside breeze wash over him. He smiled. This is much better. No shouting ministers. No scheming nobles. No endless paperwork. Just open skies, rolling hills, and endless possibilities. He took a deep breath. Goodbye, House Valmont. From today onward, I'm simply Lord Cedric of Ashfall. Far behind him, the banners of House Valmont disappeared beyond the horizon. Ahead, a barren wasteland awaited its new lord. Neither Cedric nor his companions realized that this humble convoy carried the people who would one day lay the foundation of the greatest civilization on the continent. Chapter 5, A Land Everyone Abandoned. The morning sun slowly rose over Ashfall. Its golden light should have brought warmth. Instead, it illuminated broken homes, empty streets, and endless fields covered in gray volcanic ash. Cedric stood quietly on a small hill overlooking his new territory. Behind him, Alfred unfolded an old map. My lord, this is the entire Ashfall domain. Cedric accepted the faded parchment. The map was old, very old. Several villages were marked across the territory. Ashfall Village, Riverstone, Black Creek, North Watch, Ember Hollow. At least 12 villages had once existed. Cedric frowned. How many are still inhabited? Alfred hesitated. 3. Cedric looked up. Only 3. Yes, my lord. The others have either been abandoned or destroyed. Silence filled the hilltop. Cedric remembered the novel mentioning Ashfall's decline. But reading about it, and seeing it, were completely different things. Let's walk. Without guards surrounding him, Cedric entered Ashfall Village. Everywhere he looked, signs of hardship greeted him. A blacksmith shop with a collapsed roof. A bakery with an empty oven. A school that had become little more than a shell. The market square contained only 2 stalls. One sold wilted vegetables. The other sold firewood. No customers. No laughter. Only quiet resignation. A little boy carrying an empty basket accidentally bumped into Cedric. I'm sorry. The child quickly bowed. Cedric smiled gently. It's all right. He noticed the basket. What were you buying? The boy lowered his head. Nothing. My mother asked me to see if anyone had food left. Cedric's smile slowly disappeared. Farther into the village, an old farmer struggled to pull a broken plow by himself. The ox that once pulled it had long since died. Cedric immediately walked over. Need a hand? The old man looked surprised. My lord. Cedric rolled up his sleeves. Together, they pulled the plow into the barn. The farmer stared blankly. A noble helped me. Cedric laughed. If we don't fix the farm, who's going to grow my vegetables? The old farmer didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Throughout the day, Cedric continued exploring. Each place told the same story. A carpenter without wood, a tailor without cloth, a hunter without arrows, a mill without grain. The entire local economy had collapsed years ago. Nobody produced anything because nobody could afford to buy anything. Nobody bought anything because nobody produced anything. It was a vicious cycle. Cedric rubbed his chin. This isn't just poverty. The whole system has stopped moving. That evening, Cedric gathered everyone in the village square. Nearly 300 villagers arrived. Some stood. Others sat on broken crates. Many looked nervous. One elderly woman whispered, "Is the new lord finally going to collect taxes?" Another sighed. "We have nothing left." Cedric stepped onto a wooden platform. He looked at every face before speaking. My name is Cedric Valmont. From today onward, I am your lord. Nobody cheered. They simply waited, expecting another speech filled with empty promises. Cedric smiled. I spent the entire day walking around. I've reached one conclusion. The villagers listened carefully. We're all poor. A few people blinked. Then several couldn't help laughing. The tension eased. Cedric continued. The difference is, I'm poor now too. The crowd burst into surprised laughter. Even Alfred coughed to hide his smile. Cedric raised both hands. So, if I'm going to become rich, I'll have to make all of you rich first. The laughter slowly faded. This time, everyone stared at him seriously. They had never heard a noble say such words. A middle-aged man stepped forward. My lord, how? Cedric pointed toward the abandoned fields. They can grow crops. The blacksmith, you have skills. The carpenter, you have skills. The hunters, you know the forests. The women who wove cloth, you have skills. He looked around the entire crowd. None of you are useless. You've simply been forgotten. The village fell silent. Several people quietly lowered their heads. For years, no one had ever told them they still had value. Cedric continued, I won't promise miracles. I won't tell you we'll become rich overnight. But, if you're willing to work with me, I promise this, I won't abandon Ashfall. The old village chief suddenly knelt. Then another villager. Another. Soon, nearly everyone in the square was kneeling. Cedric panicked. Wait. Please stand. I wasn't giving a royal speech. The villagers smiled for the first time in years. Not because they believed everything would magically improve, but because, for the first time in decades, someone had chosen to stay. That night, Cedric sat inside the small manor with maps spread across his desk. He listed everything Ashfall still possessed. Assets, fertile volcanic soil, underground water sources, large forests, plenty of unused land, skilled villagers. He smiled, then wrote another list. Problems: no money, no roads, no trade, no food surplus, no functioning economy, monster attacks, collapsed buildings. He stared at the two lists, then leaned back with a grin. This isn't impossible. Alfred looked over his shoulder. My lord, Cedric tapped the paper confidently. We don't have nothing. We have potential. Outside the manor, the wind carried ash across the silent fields. The people of Ashfall believed they had reached the end of their story. Cedric knew better. For him, this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, the rebuilding of Ashfall would truly begin. Chapter 6, First Things First. The next morning, before sunrise, Cedric was already awake. The servants looked at one another in disbelief. Did the young master really wake up before dawn? Elena peeked through the manor window. Cedric was already outside, holding a notebook in one hand and a steaming cup of tea in the other. Instead of inspecting the manor, he was watching the villagers. Children carrying empty buckets, women walking several kilometers to collect water, farmers dragging broken tools toward abandoned fields. The more he watched, the more he frowned. I almost made a mistake. Yesterday, he had been thinking about farming, about rebuilding the economy, about making money. But now he realized, none of those mattered yet. If people don't survive this month, there won't be anyone left to farm. Cedric called everyone together. Alfred, Captain Gareth, Elena, the village chief, several craftsmen. They gathered around a large wooden table. Cedric spread out a rough map of Ashfall village. Before we earn money, we solve 3 problems. He wrote them down. 1. Water. 2. Shelter. 3. Food. The blacksmith scratched his head. Shouldn't farming come first? Cedric shook his head. Can starving people work all day? No. Can sick people build houses? No. If we don't solve the basics, everything else fails. The room fell silent. No previous governor had ever started planning this way. First, Cedric pointed toward the dried-up village well. Why did it dry up? The elderly village chief sighed. About 15 years ago, the water slowly disappeared. We dug deeper, but found nothing. Cedric remembered something. During yesterday's journey, he had noticed unusually lush patches of grass outside the village. Underground water. It's probably still there. He smiled. We'll inspect every well in the territory. If one dries up, another source exists. Second, he pointed toward dozens of damaged houses. How many families have broken roofs? The chief answered quietly. Almost everyone. Cedric rubbed his forehead. If winter arrives, they'll freeze. He immediately made another decision. Captain Gareth, gather every carpenter. We repair roofs first. The captain blinked. Even before repairing the manor. Cedric looked outside. My roof only leaks a little. The villagers' roofs don't exist. Quote. Nobody could argue with that. Third, Cedric turned toward Alfred. Open our food inventory. Alfred hesitated. My lord, if we distribute everything, we'll barely have enough for ourselves. Cedric nodded. I know. So we'll ration it. He quickly calculated. Every household would receive enough grain for several days. Meanwhile, the hunters would gather meat. The fishermen would search nearby rivers. Foragers would collect edible plants. Everyone would contribute. Nobody would starve alone. By noon, the entire village had become busy. Carpenters climbed onto rooftops. Soldiers helped clear fallen timber. Children carried nails and tools. Even Cedric joined them. He climbed onto one of the damaged houses. Hammer in hand. Bang, bang, bang. Captain Gareth looked horrified. My lord, please come down. What if you fall? Cedric laughed. I repaired my apartment roof once. Apartment, I mean, storage house. He awkwardly changed the subject. Meanwhile, the villagers watched in amazement. A noble, covered in dust, repairing roofs. One old woman quietly wiped away tears. I've lived 70 years. I've never seen this. Later that afternoon, Cedric visited the village well. The stone walls were cracked. The bucket rope had long since broken. He knelt and examined the bottom. Dry, completely dry. He looked around, then closed his eyes. Think, why would one well dry up while the soil remains fertile? He grabbed a stick and began drawing rough terrain lines on the ground. Mountains, valleys, the old river, the abandoned village. His eyes slowly widened. I knew it. Alfred leaned closer. My lord. Cedric pointed toward a nearby hill. The underground water didn't disappear. It changed direction. The villagers stared blankly. Changed. Cedric smiled. If I'm right, we've been digging in the wrong place. The chief looked unconvinced. Can underground rivers really move? They can, especially after earthquakes. Everyone looked toward the distant volcano. Suddenly, the idea didn't seem impossible. As the sun began to set, several repaired homes stood proudly once more. They weren't beautiful, but they were safe. Children laughed while running beneath solid roofs for the first time in years. Mothers prepared dinner without worrying about rain leaking into their homes. Cedric sat beneath a tree, exhausted. His hands were sore. His clothes were filthy. His noble coat was covered in dust. Elena approached with a towel. Young master, you've worked harder today than most nobles do in a year. Cedric smiled weakly. I don't mind. He looked across the village. The progress was tiny, almost invisible. Yet, hope had returned to people's eyes. And that was worth far more than gold. Before sleeping that night, Cedric opened his notebook. He crossed out today's goals. Repair emergency shelters. Begin food rationing. Inspect water supply. Then he wrote tomorrow's objective. Find the underground river. He smiled to himself. One problem at a time. My retirement can wait. For now, these people need a future. Outside, the quiet ashfall night settled over the village. Unnoticed by everyone, far beneath the earth, crystal clear water flowed silently through ancient underground channels, waiting for someone to uncover the lifeline that would one day transform the wasteland into a flourishing civilization. Chapter 7. The First Harvest Plan. The following morning, Cedric stood before a large wooden board in the village square. Nearly every villager had gathered. Farmers, hunters, carpenters, blacksmiths, even children watched curiously. Everyone wondered what their strange young lord planned to do today. Cedric picked up a piece of charcoal. We've repaired emergency shelters. We've started rationing food. Today, we begin preparing for our future. He wrote 3 words. The first harvest. An elderly farmer raised his hand. My lord, there won't be a harvest. Cedric smiled. Why not? The old man sighed. The soil is cursed. It kills crops. Many villagers nodded in agreement. For generations, everyone had believed the same thing. Cedric simply crouched and scooped up a handful of the dark volcanic soil. He rubbed it between his fingers. This isn't cursed. It's exhausted. The crowd looked confused. What's the difference? Cedric stood. If you force the same land to grow the same crop every year, it loses nutrients. The soil isn't dead. It's simply hungry. The farmers exchanged puzzled glances. Hungry soil. They had never heard such a thing. Cedric drew a simple diagram on the wooden board. This year, we won't plant only wheat. He wrote. Beans, barley, vegetables, herbs. Then, another word, rotation. The villagers looked even more confused. What does that mean? Cedric explained patiently. Every crop takes something different from the soil. Some even return nutrients. If we rotate crops, the land heals itself. Silence. The farmers stared at the board. It sounded impossible. The oldest farmer shook his head. My lord, my father planted wheat. My grandfather planted wheat. My great-grandfather planted wheat. Cedric nodded. And each generation harvested less. The old man froze. Quote. He couldn't deny it. Cedric smiled. The land has been telling you it's tired. We simply never listened. A young farmer hesitated. What if you're wrong? Cedric laughed. Then blame me. I'll take responsibility. The villagers looked at one another. No noble had ever willingly accepted responsibility for failure. Cedric continued. We'll begin with only a few fields. Not all of them. If it works, we expand. If it fails, we lose very little. The farmers slowly nodded. That actually sounded reasonable. After the meeting, Cedric walked with the farmers toward the abandoned fields. Endless stretches of black soil spread before them. Most had not been cultivated in years. Weeds covered everything. Captain Gareth looked around. So, where do we start? Cedric pointed. There. Everyone blinked. That field. It looks terrible. Cedric smiled. Exactly. If we can grow crops there, we can grow crops anywhere. The entire village began working together. Soldiers cleared rocks. Children gathered fallen branches. Farmers removed weeds. Blacksmiths repaired broken plows. Even Elena rolled up her sleeves to help. Cedric couldn't help smiling. This feels less like ruling, and more like building something together. By afternoon, the first field had finally been cleared. The exhausted villagers sat beneath the shade of a large tree. Cedric unrolled another sketch. This is called irrigation. The farmers leaned closer. Small canals connected to larger channels. Water flowed toward every field. One farmer scratched his beard. Wouldn't that save a lot of work? Cedric grinned. Exactly. No more carrying water bucket by bucket. The farmers stared at the drawing in amazement. It was simple. So simple that they wondered why nobody had thought of it before. Then Cedric surprised everyone again. We're not plowing the entire land. What? He pointed towards several untouched areas. Leave those alone. The villagers looked confused. Why? The grass protects the soil. The trees keep moisture underground. If we destroy everything, the land will dry out. The hunters slowly nodded. That matched what they had observed in the forests. As the sun began to set, the first experimental field was ready. It wasn't large, only a small section of land. But it represented something Ashfall had not possessed in decades. Hope. The elderly farmer walked beside Cedric. My lord, I still don't fully understand your methods. Cedric smiled. Neither did people in my old. He suddenly stopped. Old books. The farmer nodded. You've read many books. I have. Then, we'll trust your books. Cedric laughed. I'll do my best not to disappoint them. That evening, back inside the manor, Cedric updated his notebook. Emergency shelters. Food rationing. Water survey. First farming field prepared. He looked out the window. Villagers who had once walked with their heads lowered were now discussing tomorrow's work with excitement. Children laughed while pretending to be farmers. For the first time, Ashfall wasn't merely surviving, it was planning for tomorrow. Cedric leaned back in his chair. One field, one village, one step at a time. He smiled softly. My retirement fund has officially been planted. Outside, the cool evening breeze swept gently across the freshly prepared farmland. Beneath the fertile volcanic soil, the first seeds of Ashfall's future were about to take root. Not just seeds of grain, but the seeds of a civilization that would one day astonish the entire continent. Chapter 8. A Lord Who Works. The morning after the first field had been prepared, Ashfall village woke to an unusual sight. Their lord was carrying lumber. 1, 2, heave. Cedric and several villagers lifted a heavy wooden beam onto the roof of a damaged farmhouse. Thud. Cedric wiped the sweat from his forehead. There. That should hold. The elderly carpenter inspected the beam before nodding. It's perfect. He looked at Cedric with disbelief. My lord, where did you learn carpentry? Cedric laughed awkwardly. I've watched people do it. And built plenty of furniture with online tutorials. Books. I learned from books. The carpenter shook his head in amazement. Your books are incredible. Word quickly spread throughout the village. The Lord is repairing houses. No, he's carrying stones too. I saw him helping the blacksmith. He even shared lunch with the workers. The villagers couldn't believe it. Most nobles never touched dirt. Cedric looked as dirty as everyone else. At noon, Captain Gareth found Cedric pushing a broken cart through the muddy road. My lord, Cedric looked up. Oh, Gareth, why are you doing that yourself? Cedric blinked. Because it needs pushing. Quote. Gareth sighed. My lord, please remember that you're a noble. Cedric smiled. I do. But I'm also the strongest pair of spare hands available. Several soldiers nearby couldn't help laughing. Meanwhile, Alfred noticed something unexpected. The villagers were working harder than before. Not because they had been ordered. Because they wanted to. The steward quietly watched an elderly woman stop Cedric. My lord, you've worked enough. Please, have some soup. Cedric accepted the wooden bowl with a grateful smile. Thank you. Another villager approached. My lord, I repaired your fence. For free. A young hunter spoke next. We caught extra rabbits today. Please take one. Soon, people began helping one another without being asked. Alfred smiled softly. So that's your plan. Cedric wasn't buying loyalty. He was earning trust. That afternoon, Cedric climbed onto another roof. Hammer in hand. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, crack, the old wooden board beneath his feet broke. Young master, Cedric slipped. For one terrifying moment, everyone below froze. Fortunately, Captain Gareth reacted instantly. He caught Cedric before he hit the ground. Silence. Then, Cedric scratched his cheek. That was embarrassing. The villagers burst into laughter. Even Gareth couldn't hide a smile. My lord, please allow professionals to climb roofs. Cedric laughed. Fair enough. Later, Cedric walked through the fields. Children were chasing one another between stacks of lumber. Unlike a few days ago, they were laughing. One little girl suddenly ran toward him. My lord, she held out a tiny white flower. For you. Cedric accepted it carefully. It's beautiful. My mother says flowers only bloom where people smile. Cedric looked around. There really were more smiles now. Not many, but enough. He gently placed the flower inside his notebook. I'll treasure it. The little girl beamed. That evening, Cedric gathered the villagers around a campfire. Instead of discussing work, he asked everyone to tell stories. Old hunters shared tales of the forests. Grandmothers spoke of festivals Ashfall once celebrated. Children talked about their dreams. Cedric listened, quietly. Then he asked, what do you all miss the most? Silence followed. Finally, the elderly village chief answered. The sound. Cedric tilted his head. What sound? The old man smiled sadly. The sound of a busy village. Hammers, laughter, merchants, children playing. The sound that tells you, life is moving forward. Cedric looked around. The village wasn't there yet. But, he could already hear it beginning. The carpenter's hammer. The blacksmith's forge. Children laughing nearby. It was faint, yet unmistakable. Ashfall was waking up. That night, Cedric sat outside the manor beneath a sky full of stars. Elena brought him a cup of warm tea. You seem happy. Cedric smiled. I am. We still have almost no money. No proper roads. No working economy. But, he looked toward the sleeping village. We're no longer alone. Elena followed his gaze. The lights inside repaired homes flickered gently in the darkness. A week ago, most of those homes had been abandoned. Now, families were eating dinner together. Children slept under repaired roofs. Workers discussed tomorrow's plans. Hope had quietly returned. Cedric chuckled. I only wanted a peaceful retirement. He took another sip of tea. Looks like I'll have to build a village first. Far above Ashfall, the stars shone brightly over the forgotten wasteland. No one beyond its borders noticed the small changes taking place. To the rest of the continent, Ashfall remained a worthless land. But to its people, their lord had already given them something far more valuable than gold. He had worked beside them. And in doing so, he had reminded them that Ashfall was worth believing in again. Chapter 9, Hidden Beneath the Wasteland. 3 days later, the village well remained dry. Cedric stood beside it with folded arms. Around him, nearly half the village had gathered. Everyone watched as he stared at the ground in complete silence. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Captain Gareth finally whispered. Is our lord talking to the dirt? Alfred sighed. I think he's thinking. Should we interrupt him? I value my life. Cedric ignored everyone. Instead, he studied the landscape. The abandoned fields. The distant hills. The direction of the old riverbed. The strange patches of green vegetation that refused to die. Water always leaves clues. If plants are growing here, there's moisture underground. He smiled. I found it. Everyone immediately crowded around him. Already, Cedric pointed toward a rocky hillside nearly 500 meters from the village. There. The villagers looked confused. There's nothing there. Cedric picked up a stick and drew on the ground. Imagine rain falling on the mountain. He drew several lines. The water doesn't disappear. It travels underground. Eventually, it gathers beneath lower ground. He tapped the hillside. The old well dried up because the underground channel shifted after an earthquake. The elderly village chief slowly nodded. There was a terrible earthquake 20 years ago. Cedric smiled. Exactly. The villagers quickly gathered tools. Pickaxes, shovels, buckets. Captain Gareth looked uncertain. My lord, what if we're digging in the wrong place? Cedric shrugged. Then we'll try somewhere else. The soldiers blinked. That's the plan. Cedric laughed. That's how research works. For the next several hours, everyone dug together. The work was exhausting. Hard volcanic rock slowed their progress. By noon, they had barely reached chest depth. One young villager sighed. My lord, I don't think anything is here. Cedric climbed into the pit. He touched the damp soil with his fingers. His eyes narrowed. Wait, he picked up a handful. Cool, much cooler than the surrounding dirt. He smiled. We're close. Another hour passed. Clang. One of the miners struck something. Rock. Cedric climbed down again. He brushed away loose dirt. It wasn't solid rock. It was ancient stone. Perfectly carved. This isn't natural. The workers exchanged nervous glances. My lord, could this be ruins? Cedric carefully uncovered more of the stone. A beautifully carved wall slowly emerged beneath centuries of ash. Ancient symbols covered its surface. Alfred gasped. This wasn't on any map. Cedric's heartbeat quickened. The novel never mentioned this. Did everyone simply overlook it? They continued clearing the area. Soon, more walls appeared. Broken pillars. Collapsed stairways. Fragments of old buildings. An entire underground structure lay buried beneath the wasteland. The village chief looked stunned. I've lived here all my life. I never knew. Cedric quietly smiled. Neither did anyone else. As everyone admired the ruins, one little boy shouted, "Water!" Everyone turned. A tiny stream had begun trickling through a crack in the ancient stone wall. At first, only a few drops. Then, more, and more. Finally, a clear stream burst from the opening. Splash! Fresh water flowed into the excavation pit. The villagers froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The elderly chief slowly knelt beside the water. With trembling hands, he scooped some into his palms. He drank. Tears immediately filled his eyes. It's clean. The entire village erupted into cheers. Children laughed. Women cried. Men embraced one another. After decades, Ashfall had water again. Captain Gareth looked at Cedric with complete disbelief. How? Cedric smiled awkwardly. I guessed. You guessed. An educated guess. The captain wasn't convinced. That evening, the villagers worked tirelessly to redirect the spring toward the village. Simple wooden channels carried fresh water downhill. For the first time in years, children no longer needed to walk hours carrying heavy buckets. Farmers filled barrels with ease. Families laughed while washing clothes in clean water. The atmosphere of Ashfall completely changed. After sunset, Cedric returned to the ruins alone. Holding a lantern, he slowly explored the exposed entrance. The ancient walls were unlike anything in the kingdom. Smooth stone, beautiful carvings, complex architecture. Then, his lantern illuminated something unexpected. A massive stone tablet, covered in ancient writing. Cedric brushed away centuries of dust. At the very bottom, one sentence remained perfectly preserved. The first city of Ashfall. Cedric's eyes widened. A city. He looked into the endless darkness beyond the broken doorway. If this truly had once been a city, then what else remained hidden beneath the wasteland? Treasures, knowledge, Lost technology. Ancient records. A smile slowly spread across his face. He had come searching for water. Instead, he had discovered history. Far beneath the sleeping wasteland, an ancient civilization had waited hundreds of years for someone to uncover its secrets. And Cedric had just opened the first door. Chapter 10. The Merchant's Surprise. 1 week later, the first signs of change had begun to spread across Ashfall. The village was still poor. The roads were still rough. Most buildings were still under repair. But now, smoke rose from repaired chimneys. Fresh water flowed through newly dug wooden channels. Children laughed while carrying buckets that no longer needed to be filled miles away. Life was slowly returning. Cedric looked over the village from a small hill and smiled. We're finally moving forward. Alfred nodded. My lord, I've also noticed something unusual. What is it? People from neighboring villages have started visiting. Cedric looked down toward the entrance of Ashfall. Several strangers were examining the rebuilt well and the repaired houses. Word was spreading. Meanwhile, on the main road leading toward the western border, a merchant caravan slowly rolled across the dusty highway. The leader of the caravan, a middle-aged merchant named Oswald Rowan, frowned as he looked at an old map. Ashfall. One of his guards laughed. That cursed place. I heard nobody lives there anymore. Oswald sighed. We're only passing through. After this we'll head to Eastbridge. Another merchant added. If we're lucky, maybe we'll find enough people to sell 2 sacks of grain. The entire caravan laughed. Nobody expected business in Ashfall. Several hours later, the caravan entered the village. Immediately, everyone fell silent. Something's different. The buildings were still old, but many had new roofs. The roads had been cleared. Fresh water flowed beside the streets. Children were playing in the square. Workers repaired houses together. It wasn't prosperous, but it was alive. Oswald blinked. This isn't what I expected. At that very moment, Cedric was helping unload timber from a wagon. Covered in dust, his sleeves rolled up, he looked more like a laborer than a noble. Oswald walked over. Excuse me. Cedric smiled. Welcome to Ashfall. I'm looking for your lord. Cedric wiped his hands on a cloth. That's me. The merchant stared. You. Cedric nodded. I'm Cedric, Lord of Ashfall. Oswald looked completely unconvinced. You're carrying lumber. Cedric shrugged. It needed carrying. After introductions, Cedric invited the merchants into the manor. Calling it a manor was generous. The furniture was simple. The walls were plain. There wasn't a single expensive decoration. Oswald looked around in disbelief. This noble truly spends nothing on luxury. Tea was served. Cedric got straight to the point. So, what do merchants usually need? Oswald blinked. Need. Cedric nodded. I'd rather understand what buyers want than guess. The merchant couldn't help smiling. Most nobles demanded taxes. This one asked market questions. Interesting. Oswald answered honestly. We need dependable suppliers, safe roads, clean water, affordable storage. Cedric quietly wrote everything down. The merchants watched him with curiosity. You're taking notes. Cedric nodded. If I know what merchants want, I know what Ashfall should build. Oswald exchanged glances with his companions. He's planning for the future. The conversation continued for hours. Cedric asked about grain prices, lumber prices, iron, livestock, salt, cloth, tools, transportation costs, everything. By sunset, Oswald felt as though he had been negotiating with another merchant rather than a noble lord. Finally he asked, My lord, what exactly are you trying to accomplish? Cedric answered honestly. I want Ashfall to become a place merchants choose to visit. Why? So I can retire comfortably. The room became completely silent. Retire. Cedric nodded. If merchants come, the villagers earn money. I earn taxes. Everyone becomes richer. I can enjoy a peaceful life. Oswald stared at him. That's actually a surprisingly sensible plan. Before leaving, Cedric presented a small gift. Several sacks of fresh vegetables harvested from the village gardens. They're not much, but please accept them. Oswald looked surprised. You don't want payment. Cedric smiled. Consider it an investment. If you enjoy them, come back. The merchant laughed. For free. Cedric shrugged. Advertising. The merchants had never heard such a strange word. But somehow, it made sense. The next morning, the caravan departed. As they left Ashfall, one guard asked, "So, will we really return?" Oswald looked back toward the village. The image of the young lord carrying lumber with the villagers remained vivid in his mind. He slowly smiled. "Yes, we'll come back. And next time, bring more wagons." The other merchants looked confused. "Why?" Oswald answered confidently. "Because that young lord is going to need them." Back in Ashfall, Cedric happily crossed another item off his notebook. Secure clean water. Restore homes. Begin farming. Establish first merchant contact. He stretched with satisfaction. "Excellent." Alfred looked over his shoulder. "My lord, do you really think they'll return?" Cedric smiled. "They're merchants. If there's profit, they'll always return." He closed the notebook. Outside the manor, several villagers were already discussing what products they could eventually sell. For the first time, Ashfall was no longer isolated. A single merchant caravan had carried more than goods. It had carried news. And somewhere beyond the borders of the forgotten wasteland, people were beginning to whisper. "They say the Ashfall wasteland has a young lord who might actually bring it back to life." The first rumor had left Ashfall. Soon, the entire continent would hear its name. Chapter 11, Making Money the Honest Way. Several days after the merchants departed, Ashfall had become busier than ever. The repaired fields were being cultivated. Carpenters continued restoring homes. Blacksmiths worked from sunrise until sunset. Even the children proudly helped by carrying small tools and watering newly planted crops. Cedric watched everything from the village square. Then, he frowned. "Something's wrong." Alfred looked up from his ledger. "My lord." Cedric pointed toward the workers. "They're working harder than ever. Yet nobody is earning any money." The steward blinked. "You're right. Everyone was helping each other. But almost everything was done through favors. The economy still wasn't moving." That evening, Cedric gathered the village craftsmen. The blacksmith, the carpenter, the tailor, the potter, the hunters, the farmers. Everyone sat around a long wooden table. Cedric placed a pouch of silver coins in the center. Clink. "This is our starting capital." The villagers stared at the small pouch. It wasn't much. In fact, it was almost everything House Ashfall had left. Cedric smiled. "Tell me, if the blacksmith repairs a plow, how does he eat?" The blacksmith scratched his head. "The farmer gives me vegetables." Cedric nodded. "And the farmer? He asks the carpenter to repair his fence." "And the carpenter? He trades with the hunter." Cedric continued asking until everyone realized something. Nobody was actually earning money. They were simply exchanging favors. Cedric stood and wrote one sentence on the wooden board. "Work deserves payment." The villagers quietly read the words. He continued. "If people are paid fairly, they can choose what to buy. If they can buy, more people can sell. If more people sell, the village grows richer." The elderly village chief slowly nodded. "Money keeps everything moving." Cedric smiled. "Exactly." The next morning, Cedric introduced something Ashfall had almost forgotten. A proper marketplace. The abandoned square was cleaned. Broken stalls were repaired. Wooden signs were placed along each street. Farmers could now sell vegetables. Hunters sold fresh game. The blacksmith offered repaired tools. The tailor displayed simple clothes. Everyone could finally trade openly. But Cedric wasn't finished. He announced another policy. "Starting today, House Ashfall will purchase goods." The villagers looked surprised. "My lord." Cedric nodded. "If you grow extra vegetables, I'll buy them. If you make quality tools, I'll buy them. If hunters bring surplus meat, I'll buy it." The people exchanged excited glances. For the first time, they had a guaranteed customer. Alfred quietly asked, "Won't that empty our treasury?" Cedric smiled. "Only temporarily." He pointed toward the storage warehouse. "We'll store the goods. When merchants return, we'll sell them." Alfred's eyes widened. "So that's your plan? We become the middleman?" Cedric grinned. "Exactly." Within a week, the effects became obvious. The farmers planted larger gardens. The blacksmith worked longer hours. Hunters ventured farther into the forests. Carpenters accepted more jobs. Everyone knew that extra work now meant extra income. The entire village became noticeably more energetic. One afternoon, Cedric visited the newly opened marketplace. An elderly woman stopped him. My lord. She carefully handed him 2 freshly baked loaves of bread. I finally earned enough coins to buy flour. She smiled warmly. I baked these for you. Cedric accepted them with a grateful smile. Thank you. Nearby, children excitedly counted a few copper coins they had earned gathering herbs. The blacksmith proudly purchased a new hammer. The tailor bought better thread. Money was finally changing hands. Not because people were forced to pay taxes, but because they wanted to trade. That evening, Cedric gathered everyone once again. He held up a small ledger. This is where every coin will be recorded. The villagers looked confused. You'll write everything down. Cedric nodded. Every purchase, every sale, every tax. If House Ashfall receives 1 coin, everyone will know where it came from. The crowd fell silent. No lord had ever spoken about transparency before. One farmer hesitated. My lord, then, you can't secretly raise taxes. Cedric laughed. Exactly. If I ever do, you'll all catch me. The villagers burst into laughter. Trust grew even stronger. Late that night, Alfred reviewed the day's records. He smiled to himself. My lord, I've served House Valmont for over 40 years. I've never seen accounts this organized. Cedric chuckled. I hate wasting money. He looked toward the village outside. Lights still burned inside the workshops. People were working willingly, not because they were desperate, but because their efforts now had value. Cedric leaned back with satisfaction. A fair wage, honest trade, clear records. They sound ordinary. He smiled. But they're the foundation of every prosperous civilization. Outside, the marketplace slowly emptied as the stars filled the night sky. The coins exchanged that day were few. Barely enough to impress any noble. Yet each coin represented something far greater. Not wealth, but trust. And in Ashfall, trust had begun to circulate just as freely as money. Chapter 12. Refugees of Ashfall. Early one morning, the village guards noticed a line of people slowly approaching Ashfall. Not merchants, not soldiers, families. Old men leaned on walking sticks. Mothers carried sleeping children. Young boys pulled broken wooden carts containing everything they still owned. Their clothes were worn. Their faces were filled with exhaustion. Captain Gareth immediately reported the situation. My lord, several dozen strangers are approaching. Cedric looked toward the village entrance. They're refugees. As the group finally reached Ashfall, an elderly man stepped forward. He removed his tattered hat and bowed. My lord, we've heard that Ashfall has clean water. Cedric nodded. It does. The old man's eyes became red. We've walked for 12 days. Our village no longer exists. Silence fell. Behind him, dozens of people lowered their heads. Some quietly cried. Cedric invited them into the village square. Fresh water was immediately distributed. The refugees drank desperately. Children smiled for the first time in days. Several women wept while filling their water skins. Elena quietly handed bread to the youngest children. No one eats slowly today. Eat until you're full. After everyone had rested, Cedric sat down with the village elder. What happened? The old man sighed heavily. Our lord kept raising taxes. Then drought came. Then bandits. When winter arrived, there was nothing left. So you left. We had no choice. The old man looked ashamed. We know we have nothing to offer. If you'll allow us, we only ask to stay for one night. Cedric looked at Alfred. How much grain remains? The steward answered honestly. Enough for about 3 weeks. If we are careful. Captain Gareth whispered. My lord, if we accept everyone, our food may not last. The room grew quiet. It was a difficult choice. Cedric stood and looked toward the refugees. Nearly 80 people. 80 hungry mouths. 80 frightened faces. Then he looked around Ashfall. Empty houses. Unused farmland. Abandoned workshops. A slow smile appeared. They're not a burden. Everyone looked at him. What? Cedric pointed toward the abandoned village. We've been complaining that we don't have enough workers. The carpenter blinked. That's true. The farms need people. The blacksmith nodded. I could use apprentices. The hunters spoke next. We've been stretched thin. Cedric smiled wider. Exactly. He turned back toward the refugees. You came looking for shelter. I've been looking for neighbors. The refugees stared in disbelief. You'll accept us. Cedric nodded. On one condition. The atmosphere became tense. The old man lowered his head. We'll accept any condition. Cedric smiled gently. No one receives charity forever. The refugees listened carefully. If you can work, you'll work. If you earn wages, you'll buy what you need. If you're sick, you'll recover first. If you're elderly, you'll help however you can. He looked every refugee in the eyes. In Ashfall, everyone contributes, but no one is abandoned. Silence. Then, the old village elder suddenly knelt. Not because he had been ordered. Because he could no longer hold back his emotions. My lord, thank you. Soon, every refugee bowed, not to a noble, but to the man who had given them another chance to live. The following days became incredibly busy. Empty houses were repaired, unused farmland was assigned, blacksmith apprentices began learning, children attended simple reading lessons organized by Elena. Even the elderly found work weaving baskets, preparing meals, and watching over younger children. The population of Ashfall grew rapidly. And with it, the village became livelier than ever. One afternoon, Cedric walked through the marketplace. He noticed children from Ashfall playing with children from the refugee families. There was no distinction anymore. Only laughter. The elderly village chief smiled. My lord, you've doubled our workforce. Cedric laughed. I was only trying to help. The chief shook his head. You also doubled our future. That evening, Alfred reviewed the latest records. My lord, our population has increased from just under 300 to nearly 380. Cedric smiled. Good. But, Alfred hesitated. Our expenses have increased as well. Cedric nodded. They will. For now. He looked toward the distant fields. But when harvest season comes, those fields will feed all of us. As night fell, the lights of Ashfall stretched farther than ever. Before, homes that had stood empty for decades now glowed warmly. Smoke rose from dozens of newly lit chimneys. The sound of families talking around dinner tables echoed through the village. Cedric stood quietly outside the manor. I only wanted enough money to retire peacefully. He chuckled. Instead, I keep adopting an entire village. Elena smiled beside him. My lord, I think Ashfall chose you. Cedric looked across the growing settlement. Maybe she was right. He had inherited a wasteland. But little by little, the wasteland was becoming a home. And people from beyond its borders had already begun searching for it, not because it was rich, but because it was the one place that still welcomed those the rest of the world had forgotten. Chapter 13. Rebuilding Hope. Autumn arrived in Ashfall. Golden sunlight spread across the once forgotten wasteland. Although much of the land still lay untouched, the heart of the territory had changed dramatically. The repaired homes stood proudly. The marketplace opened every morning. Children ran through streets that were no longer covered in rubble. For the first time in decades, Ashfall looked alive. Cedric stood on the hill overlooking the village with a satisfied smile. It finally looks like a place people can live. Alfred smiled beside him. My lord, it feels like home. The following morning, Cedric called a meeting. Everyone gathered in the village square. Farmers, craftsmen, hunters, the refugee families, even the children came, curious about what their lord would announce this time. Cedric unrolled another map. We've repaired Ashfall village. The villagers nodded proudly. But, he pointed farther west. A cluster of abandoned buildings appeared on the map. This is Ember Hollow. Several elderly villagers lowered their heads. One of them whispered, I was born there. Another quietly added, it used to be the largest farming village in the territory. Cedric looked at them. Then, let's bring it back. Silence. Then, the entire square erupted into whispers. Rebuild another village. So soon. Can we really do it? Cedric nodded. We're no longer 300 people. We're almost 400. We have craftsmen. We have farmers. We have clean water. And, he smiled, we have hope. 3 days later, a caravan of workers departed Ashfall. Cedric rode at the front with Captain Gareth. Behind them came dozens of villagers carrying lumber, stone, farming tools, and food. When they finally reached Ember Hollow, everyone fell silent. Collapsed homes, broken windmills, fields swallowed by weeds, an abandoned chapel whose bell tower had fallen long ago. Nature had slowly reclaimed everything. One little boy quietly asked, did people really live here? An elderly refugee smiled sadly. They laughed here. They celebrated festivals here. They raised families here. Cedric looked across the ruins. They will again. Work began immediately. The strongest workers cleared collapsed buildings. Carpenters repaired houses that could still be saved. The blacksmith restored broken farming tools found beneath the debris. Children collected loose stones for rebuilding walls. Even the elderly sorted usable timber. Nobody stood idle. At noon, Cedric found a small apple tree growing beside a ruined house. Half its branches had died. Yet, several apples still hung from its limbs. He carefully picked one. It's sweet. The elderly villager who had once lived there smiled. My wife planted that tree 30 years ago. His voice trembled. I thought it had died. Cedric gently handed him the apple. No, it was waiting. The old man quietly wiped away tears. As the days passed, more houses stood again. The abandoned well was repaired, using water redirected from the newly discovered underground spring. Fields were cleared. Roads connected Ember Hollow to Ashfall Village. The two settlements no longer felt isolated. They felt connected. One afternoon, several children discovered an old wooden sign buried beneath weeds. Together they cleaned it. The faded words slowly became visible. Ember Hollow. The children excitedly carried it to Cedric. My lord, we found it. Cedric smiled. Then let's put it back. Together, the villagers raised the old sign at the entrance of the village once more. Everyone applauded. It was only a wooden sign. But to those who had once lived there, it meant their home existed again. That evening, as the workers rested around a campfire, one elderly woman quietly approached Cedric. My lord, I have something for you. She handed him a small wooden carving. It depicted a simple house surrounded by flowers. I carved it, to thank you. Cedric accepted it carefully. I'll treasure it. The woman smiled. You didn't just rebuild our houses. You rebuilt our memories. A week later, the first family officially moved into Ember Hollow. Then another. And another. Smoke once again rose from chimneys that had been cold for decades. The abandoned village echoed with children's laughter. The sound traveled across the valley. Ashfall Village answered with laughter of its own. That night, Cedric updated his notebook. Ashfall Village restored. Refugees settled. Marketplace established. Ember Hollow rebuilt. He leaned back with a contented sigh. My retirement is getting farther away. He chuckled softly. But somehow, I'm happier than I expected. Outside his window, lanterns glowed in two villages instead of one. For years, the people of Ashfall had believed every abandoned home marked the end of someone's story. Cedric had shown them something different. Sometimes, an abandoned place wasn't the end. It was simply waiting for someone to begin again. And with every repaired roof, every reopened road, and every family that returned, the dream of rebuilding an entire civilization took another quiet step forward. Chapter 14. Monsters in the Forest. The peaceful days did not last forever. At sunrise, a loud bell echoed across Ashfall. Dong, dong, dong. Villagers rushed out of their homes. Captain Gareth came running toward the manor. My lord. Cedric immediately put down his breakfast. What happened? A hunting party hasn't returned. Within minutes, the village square filled with anxious faces. 3 hunters had left before dawn. Only one had come back. The survivor's clothes were torn. Blood stained his sleeve. He collapsed to one knee before Cedric. My lord, we were attacked. Cedric frowned. Bandits. The hunter shook his head. Forest wolves. The square became silent. Everyone knew those monsters. Unlike ordinary wolves, forest wolves were the size of horses. They hunted in coordinated packs. Even trained adventurers treated them cautiously. Captain Gareth unrolled a map. The attack happened here. He pointed to a dense forest northwest of Ember Hollow. Cedric recognized the location immediately. According to the novel, the monsters rarely left that forest. So why are they attacking now? He looked at the hunter. Did you enter their territory? The hunter hesitated. Further than usual. We were chasing a deer. Cedric quietly nodded. That explained it. Several frightened villagers spoke at once. We have to kill them. They'll attack again. Burn the forest. Cedric raised a hand. The shouting stopped. No. Everyone stared at him. No. Cedric looked toward the distant forest. If they wanted to attack the village, they already would have. They attacked because we entered their territory. Captain Gareth crossed his arms. So, what do you suggest? Cedric smiled. First, we investigate. An hour later, Cedric entered the forest with Captain Gareth, 6 knights, and the surviving hunter. Sunlight barely reached the ground beneath the towering trees. The deeper they walked, the quieter the forest became. Broken branches, large paw prints, fresh claw marks. Captain Gareth knelt beside one of them. They're close. Cedric nodded. I know. Suddenly, grr, a deep growl echoed through the trees. Everyone immediately drew their weapons. From the bushes, a massive silver-gray wolf slowly emerged. Then another. And another. 7 in total. Their golden eyes remained fixed on the humans. The knights prepared to charge. Cedric quickly raised his hand. Nobody attacks. My lord. They're monsters. Cedric never looked away from the wolves. They're protecting something. Then he noticed it. Behind the largest wolf, hidden beneath tangled roots, was a small cave, and inside, tiny whimpers. Cedric's eyes widened. Pups. The wolves weren't hunting. They were guarding their young. Everything suddenly made sense. The hunters had unknowingly wandered too close to the den. Cedric slowly lowered his sword. We're leaving. Captain Gareth looked shocked. That's all. Cedric nodded. They defended their home. We'll defend ours. We don't need a war. The knights reluctantly obeyed. The wolves never attacked. They simply watched until the humans disappeared into the trees. Back in Ashfall, the villagers eagerly waited. Did you kill them? Cedric shook his head. No. The crowd erupted into worried whispers. He climbed onto a wooden platform. They're not invading. They're protecting their cubs. Silence fell. The hunter who had survived slowly lowered his head. Then, it was our fault. Cedric nodded. Not intentionally. But yes. He immediately gave new orders. From today onward, no hunting beyond the northern stream. We'll mark the wolves' territory. If they stay inside the forest, we stay outside it. One farmer hesitated. What if they attack later? Cedric smiled. Then we'll deal with it. But we won't create enemies before we have to. Over the next several days, wooden signs were placed around the forest. Danger, monster territory. Hunters adjusted their routes. Gatherers explored safer areas. Surprisingly, no further attacks occurred. The forest wolves remained inside their territory. Ashfall continued growing in peace. That evening, Cedric sat outside the manor, looking toward the distant forest. Elena brought him a cup of tea. You could have ordered the knights to kill them. Cedric accepted the cup. I could have. Then why didn't you? He smiled faintly. I came here to build a home. Not to destroy someone else's. Far away, a lone wolf's howl echoed across the mountains. This time, it no longer sounded like a threat. It sounded like a reminder. Ashfall was not an empty wasteland. It was a land shared by humans, monsters, forests, and forgotten ruins. If Cedric truly wished to build a civilization, he would first have to learn how to live alongside the world that already existed. Chapter 15, The Forest Partnership. The day after the encounter with the Ash Wolves, Ashfall was unusually quiet, not because people were afraid, but because everyone was thinking about what had happened. For generations, the villagers had believed one thing. Monsters were enemies. Yet their young lord had returned without drawing a single sword. That morning, Cedric gathered the hunters, woodcutters, and Captain Gareth. He spread a new map across the table. The western forest was divided into colored sections. Green, yellow, red. The hunters looked puzzled. My lord, Cedric pointed at the map. From today onward, the forest belongs to everyone. Silence. Then Gareth frowned. Even the monsters. Cedric nodded. They lived there before we did. He explained the new system. Green zone. Safe for gathering herbs, mushrooms, and fallen timber. Yellow zone. Limited logging under supervision. Red zone. The Ash Wolves' territory. Strictly forbidden without permission. One hunter scratched his head. Permission. Cedric smiled. I mean making sure they're not nearby. The room burst into laughter. The hunters soon put the plan into practice. Instead of cutting trees at random, they carefully avoided the wolves' den. Instead of chasing every animal, they hunted only what Ashfall actually needed. Within days, strange reports began reaching the village. My lord, the wolves ignored us. Another hunter added. They simply watched. A third laughed. They even scared away wild boars before we arrived. Captain Gareth blinked. Are they guarding us? Cedric chuckled. Not us. Their territory. But our interests happen to match. Several days later, a group of children collecting herbs ran back to the village. My lord, The wolves. Everyone rushed outside. The large ash wolf stood at the edge of the forest. Beside it, 2 young pups stumbled curiously through the grass. The villagers instinctively stepped back. Cedric slowly walked forward alone. The great wolf watched him quietly. Then, to everyone's surprise, it gently nudged something forward with its nose. A freshly hunted wild boar. The villagers gasped. It brought us food. Cedric looked at the wolf. No, he smiled. It's sharing the hunting grounds. The wolf let out a low growl before turning back toward the forest. Its pups happily followed behind. That evening, the village buzzed with excitement. Children excitedly drew pictures of the wolf pups. Hunters discussed how much safer the forest had become. The elderly village chief smiled. In all my years, I never imagined we'd have monster neighbors. Cedric laughed. Neither did I. As autumn deepened, the forest itself began changing. Because fewer trees were cut, birds returned, small animals multiplied, medicinal herbs became easier to find. Even the streams flowing from the mountains became cleaner. One healer approached Cedric. My lord, we're collecting nearly twice as many herbs. Cedric nodded. A healthy forest takes care of itself. One afternoon, while surveying the protected zone, Cedric noticed something unusual. Near the wolves' territory, a patch of glowing blue flowers bloomed beneath ancient trees. He carefully knelt beside them. Moondew flowers. His eyes widened. These rare medicinal flowers sold for enormous sums in the capital. According to the original novel, they only grew where forests remained completely undisturbed. Cedric laughed softly. So that's why nobody ever found them. The wolves had unknowingly protected one of the kingdom's most valuable medicinal resources. Back in the village, Cedric gathered everyone again. He carefully held up one of the glowing flowers. This is worth more than a wagon full of ordinary wheat. The villagers stared in shock. One flower. Cedric nodded. If we harvest them carefully and never damage the forest, they'll bloom every year. Alfred nearly dropped his ledger. My lord, we've discovered another source of income. Cedric grinned. And we didn't even have to fight anyone. That night, he added another page to Ashfall's growing book of laws. Forest protection rules. Respect monster territories. Harvest only what is needed. Replant trees after logging. Never destroy medicinal flower fields. Protect the balance between people and nature. He closed the book with satisfaction. Outside, the moon shone over the quiet forest. Far away, the howl of the ash wolves echoed through the night. It no longer sounded threatening. To the people of Ashfall, it had become the sound of trustworthy neighbors watching over the forest. Cedric leaned against the manor window and smiled. I came here to retire peacefully. And somehow, I just made a trade agreement with wolves. He laughed to himself. Perhaps the greatest strength of a civilization wasn't its armies, or its wealth, but its ability to turn fear into understanding. And in the forests of Ashfall, humans and monsters had taken their very first step toward living together. Chapter 16. Roads bring prosperity. Winter had not yet arrived. The cool autumn breeze swept across Ashfall as carts traveled between Ashfall Village and Ember Hollow. For the first time in decades, the two villages were connected. But Cedric wasn't smiling. Instead, he watched a merchant wagon sink axle deep into the muddy road. There it is again. With a loud grunt, 6 villagers pushed the wagon free. The merchant wiped the sweat from his forehead. My lord, if it rains one more time, this road will disappear. Cedric looked at the deep wheel ruts stretching across the road. He quietly nodded. It doesn't matter how much food we grow. If we can't move it, we'll never become rich. That evening, Cedric gathered the village leaders. On the table lay another hand-drawn map. This time, instead of farms, instead of forests, it showed roads. My lord, the carpenter tilted his head. Cedric pointed toward the villages. What connects a civilization? The blacksmith answered. Trade. Cedric nodded. And what connects trade? Silence. Then Alfred smiled. Roads. Cedric snapped his fingers. Exactly. He drew 3 thick lines across the map. Road 1. Ashfall Village left right arrow Ember Hollow. Road 2. Ashfall Village left right arrow Western Forest. Road 3. Ashfall Village left right arrow Main Kingdom Highway. Captain Gareth frowned. Building roads will take months. Cedric nodded. It will. But every day we wait, We lose money. The following morning, construction began. Hundreds of villagers volunteered. Some dug drainage ditches. Others carried stone. Children gathered loose gravel. Even the elderly prepared meals for the workers. Cedric worked alongside everyone, carrying baskets of crushed rock, leveling uneven ground, measuring road widths with simple ropes. Captain Gareth sighed. "My lord, you really don't know how to act like a noble." Cedric laughed. "I know, but I do know how to build roads." One afternoon, a young boy asked, "My lord, why are roads so important?" Cedric picked up 2 apples. He placed one beside the boy, the other several meters away. "If you're hungry, which apple is easier to eat?" "The closer one." Cedric smiled. "Exactly. The easier it is to move things, the cheaper they become." The farmers nearby slowly nodded. For the first time, they understood. A week later, the first section of stone road was finished. It wasn't luxurious, just carefully packed gravel with proper drainage on both sides. Then, the first heavy wagon crossed it. Instead of sinking, the wheels rolled smoothly. The driver blinked. "That's it." He looked back. No mud, no broken wheels. Cedric smiled proudly. No mud. The villagers erupted into cheers. Word spread quickly. Merchants returning to Ashfall couldn't believe the difference. One caravan leader laughed. "I reached the village in half the usual time." Another added, "My wagon didn't lose a single wheel." A third merchant smiled. "I'll definitely return next month." Cedric quietly wrote another note in his notebook. Fast travel equals more merchants. The roads also changed daily life. Children reached Ember Hollow's school much faster. Farmers transported vegetables before they spoiled. Healers visited patients in neighboring villages within hours instead of half a day. The villages no longer felt separated. They had become one community. Several days later, Cedric climbed a hill overlooking the completed roadway. From above, he watched carts continuously traveling between villages. Lumber, vegetables, tools, livestock, everything moved steadily. Alfred stood beside him. "My lord, it doesn't look like much." Cedric smiled. "Most people only see a road." He pointed toward the busy traffic below. "I see opportunity." That evening, he added another page to Ashfall's growing development journal. "Infrastructure comes before wealth. Build roads first. Trade becomes easier. Prices become lower. Merchants visit more often. Prosperity follows naturally." He closed the journal with satisfaction. "I didn't build a road today." He looked toward the wagon still moving beneath the evening sky. "I built the path. That prosperity will follow." Far beyond Ashfall, another merchant caravan noticed the new road leading into the once forgotten wasteland. Instead of avoiding it, they turned their wagons toward it. One merchant smiled. "I heard the young lord of Ashfall is rebuilding everything." Another nodded. "If the roads are this good, I wonder what the village looks like now." One by one, more wagons followed. The road Cedric had built with his own hands was doing exactly what he intended. It wasn't merely connecting villages. It was bringing the outside world to Ashfall. And every wagon that rolled across its stones carried another piece of the civilization Cedric never meant to build. Chapter 17. The First Great Harvest. The first frost of the year settled gently over Ashfall. As the morning mist lifted, golden fields stretched across the valley. Fields that had once been abandoned were now filled with ripened barley, wheat, beans, and vegetables swaying beneath the autumn breeze. Cedric stood on a small hill with Alfred. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Alfred smiled. "We did it." Cedric let out a long breath. "No." He looked toward the hundreds of villagers preparing for harvest. "We all did." The sound of bells echoed through Ashfall. Dong, dong. The entire territory came alive. Farmers grabbed their sickles. Children carried baskets. Hunters returned early to help. Even the elderly sat beside the fields, tying harvested crops into bundles. Today, no one stayed home. Today was harvest day. Cedric walked into the largest field. The elderly farmer who had once insisted the land was cursed stood waiting. His eyes were filled with tears. "My lord." He slowly cut the first stalk of wheat. Golden grains spilled into his hands. He stared silently. Then, he laughed. A deep, joyful laugh. It grew. It really grew. The surrounding farmers erupted into cheers. For decades, Ashfall's fields had produced almost nothing. Now, the harvest exceeded everyone's expectations. Throughout the day, the wagons filled one after another. Barrels of grain, fresh vegetables, medicinal herbs, beans, fruit. Children happily counted overflowing baskets. Women sang old harvest songs that had not been heard in years. Even Captain Gareth found himself carrying sacks of grain. My lord, Cedric looked over. Yes, I think this might be the happiest battle I've ever fought. Cedric laughed. I'll take harvests over wars any day. Near noon, Oswald Rowan's merchant caravan arrived once again. The merchant stopped in complete disbelief. Quote. Those fields. The once barren wasteland had transformed into fertile farmland. Smoke rose from prosperous villages. Stone roads connected the settlements. Workers bustled everywhere. Oswald slowly climbed down from his wagon. Lord Cedric. Cedric smiled. Welcome back. The merchant looked toward the overflowing granaries. You weren't exaggerating. Cedric shrugged. I rarely do. Inside the newly expanded warehouse, Cedric showed Oswald the harvest. Sacks of wheat lined the walls. Bundles of herbs hung from the ceiling. Fresh vegetables were carefully sorted into crates. Oswald whistled softly. This is enough to supply several towns. Cedric nodded. I'd like to sell it. The merchant smiled. I'd like to buy it. Negotiations began immediately. Unlike most nobles, Cedric had already researched market prices. He calmly discussed transportation costs, storage expenses, seasonal demand, quality grading. Oswald eventually laughed. My lord, I can barely negotiate with you. Cedric grinned. I learned from asking merchants questions. After several hours, they reached an agreement. House Ashfall sold its first large commercial shipment. The warehouse workers celebrated as silver coins filled the treasury chest. Clink, clink, clink. The sound echoed throughout the manor. Alfred quietly counted the final amount. His hands trembled. My lord, this is more income than Ashfall has earned in over 30 years. Cedric smiled. Good. We'll need it. The villagers expected a celebration. Instead, Cedric gathered everyone in the square. He opened the treasury chest. Everyone stared at the glittering silver. Then, Cedric shocked them. This money belongs to Ashfall. He divided the earnings. One portion for workers' wages. One for rebuilding. One for emergency food reserves. One for expanding roads. One for future investments. Only a small portion remained for the manor. The villagers stared in disbelief. My lord, you kept the smallest share. Cedric laughed. I already have a house. You all still need a better future. That evening, Ashfall celebrated its first harvest festival. Long wooden tables filled the square. Fresh bread, roasted meat, vegetable stew, apple pies. Children danced around bonfires. Musicians played cheerful melodies. The elderly smiled as they watched younger generations laugh together. For many, it was the first true festival they had experienced since childhood. As the celebration continued, the elderly farmer approached Cedric once more. My lord, he carefully handed Cedric the very first bundle of harvested wheat. It belongs to you. Cedric accepted it gently, then shook his head. No. He walked to the village shrine, carefully placing the wheat there. This belongs to everyone who never gave up. Silence fell. Then, the villagers applauded, not because their lord had become wealthy, but because he had never forgotten why they worked so hard. Late that night, Cedric opened his notebook. He crossed out another goal. Restore farmland. Achieve first successful harvest. Establish profitable trade. He leaned back in his chair. Outside, the sounds of laughter still echoed through Ashfall. He smiled quietly. My retirement fund is finally growing. He looked out toward the moonlit fields. Months ago, the land had been called a wasteland. Now, it fed hundreds of people. Tomorrow, it would feed thousands. The first great harvest was more than a season of abundance. It was proof that Ashfall could truly change. And beyond the borders of the territory, news of the miraculous harvest spread from merchant to merchant. The forgotten wasteland was forgotten no longer. A new name had begun appearing on trade maps. Ashfall. Chapter 18. A town is born. Winter arrived quietly. A blanket of white frost covered the rooftops of Ashfall. Smoke curled from sturdy chimneys. Children chased one another through streets that no longer turned into muddy paths. The first snow of the year did not bring fear. It brought excitement. Cedric stood outside the manor, watching the peaceful scene. He smiled. We made it. Last winter, many people would not have survived. This year, every family had food stored away. Every home had a repaired roof. Every fireplace burned warmly. A loud knock echoed through the manor. My lord, Captain Gareth hurried inside. The merchants have arrived. Cedric blinked. In this weather, they said the roads are good enough. Cedric laughed. So the roads are already paying for themselves. Outside the village, 3 merchant caravans waited. Not 1, not 2, 3. Oswald Rowan stepped down from his wagon with a broad smile. Lord Cedric, I brought friends. The other merchants bowed politely. We've heard many stories about Ashfall. We wanted to see it ourselves. Cedric welcomed them warmly. Then let me show you around. The merchants expected a poor frontier village. Instead, they found something entirely different. Stone-paved roads, a busy marketplace, granaries filled with grain, organized workshops, clean streets, children studying simple arithmetic on wooden boards. One merchant whispered, "This place feels organized." Cedric smiled. I like things that make sense. The tour continued. The blacksmith district, the carpentry workshop, the herb drying houses, the warehouses. Finally, they reached the marketplace. Although snow covered the rooftops, business continued as usual. Fresh bread, warm soup, winter vegetables, fur clothing, firewood. Everything was neatly arranged. Oswald laughed. My friend, this isn't a village anymore. Cedric tilted his head. It isn't. The merchant shook his head. No, this is becoming a town. The words lingered in Cedric's mind. A town. He had never thought about it. His goal had only been survival. Yet, without realizing it, Ashfall had outgrown its beginnings. That evening, Cedric gathered the village elders. The merchants believe Ashfall has become a town. The room fell silent. Finally, the elderly village chief smiled. They're right. He looked around. We now have 2 villages. Permanent trade, workshops, warehouses, stone roads, a growing population. My lord, we've become something bigger. Cedric opened his notebook. He drew a line through the words. Ashfall Village. Then slowly wrote beneath it. Ashfall Town. He stared at the page for several moments. Well, I guess retirement keeps getting delayed. Everyone laughed. The following week, Cedric announced his next project. A proper town square. The villagers gathered around the plans. A larger market, a public well, a clock tower, a small school, a clinic, a council hall. The carpenter's eyes widened. My lord, that's enormous. Cedric nodded. If people continue moving here, we'll need room to grow. Construction began immediately. Even during winter, the people worked tirelessly whenever the weather allowed. Children carried bricks, craftsmen shaped stone, blacksmiths forged iron nails. The entire community built together. Not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in the future. One afternoon, Cedric noticed a group of children drawing pictures in the snow. He walked closer. What are you making? One little girl smiled brightly. Our town. She pointed proudly. That's the market. That's the school. And she drew a small figure standing beside everyone else. That's you. Cedric chuckled. You made me too tall. The children laughed. No, you're just standing on the hill. Several days later, a royal courier unexpectedly arrived. The villagers watched, nervously. The messenger carried an official letter bearing the kingdom's seal. Cedric opened it. Inside was a short message. His Majesty has received reports regarding the remarkable recovery of Ashfall. Continue your good work. Additional evaluations will be conducted in the future. There was no praise, no reward, only acknowledgement. Cedric smiled anyway. The kingdom finally noticed us. Alfred looked relieved. At least they aren't trying to interfere. Yet, Cedric folded the letter. Let's keep it that way. That evening, the foundation of the new town square was completed. Everyone gathered around as the final stone was laid. The elderly village chief looked across the growing settlement. His voice trembled. I never thought I'd live to see this. Cedric quietly looked around. Warm homes, busy workshops, children laughing, merchants arriving despite the snow. People planning for next spring instead of worrying about tomorrow's meal. Months ago, Ashfall had been called a wasteland. Now, it had become a town. He looked up at the falling snow. I only asked for land. Because I wanted a quiet retirement. He smiled to himself. Instead, I accidentally built a town. Far beyond Ashfall, new trade maps were already being redrawn. What had once been marked as abandoned wasteland now bore a different name. Ashfall Town. And for the first time in generations, people were no longer asking how to escape Ashfall. They were asking how to move there. Chapter 19. The Council of Ashfall. Winter settled firmly over Ashfall Town. Snow covered the rooftops. The marketplace remained lively despite the cold. Merchants continued arriving almost every week. The warehouses were nearly full. The treasury had never been healthier. Yet Cedric frowned as he reviewed another stack of reports. There's too much paperwork. Alfred looked up from his own mountain of ledgers. My lord, Cedric sighed dramatically. I wanted retirement, not endless documents. The steward chuckled. Congratulations. You've officially become a proper lord. Cedric looked horrified. That's exactly what I was trying to avoid. Over the next few days, more problems appeared. Two farmers argued over irrigation schedules. A merchant requested permission to build a larger warehouse. Hunters wanted to expand patrol routes. The school needed additional teachers. The clinic requested more supplies. Every decision eventually reached Cedric's desk. One evening, he stared at the endless pile of documents. No, I'm not becoming a workaholic again. The next morning, the entire town was summoned to the square. People gathered curiously. Cedric stood before a newly built wooden hall. A sign hung above its entrance. Ashfall Council Hall. The crowd whispered among themselves. Council. Cedric smiled. Today, Ashfall gains something new. Inside the hall, a large round table stood in the center. Around it were several empty chairs. The townspeople looked puzzled. Cedric began explaining. When Ashfall was only one village, I could decide everything myself. But now, he gestured toward the bustling town outside. We've grown, and one person shouldn't decide everything. Silence filled the hall. No noble had ever spoken those words before. Cedric pointed to the empty seats. Each part of Ashfall will choose a representative. One seat for the farmers. One for the craftsmen. One for the merchants. One for the hunters. One for the healers. One for the teachers. One for the villages. Captain Gareth raised an eyebrow. You're sharing authority. Cedric nodded. I'm sharing responsibility. The townspeople spent the afternoon selecting representatives. The elderly farmer Elias represented agriculture. Master Rowan represented the craftsmen. Merchant Oswald accepted the merchant's seat. Captain Gareth represented security. Healer Miriam spoke for medicine. Teacher Elena represented education. Village Chief Bernard represented the residents. By sunset, the first council of Ashfall had officially formed. Their first meeting began immediately. Cedric placed a simple wooden box in the center of the table. What is that? A suggestion box. The council members blinked. Cedric smiled. If anyone in Ashfall has an idea, they can write it down. We'll discuss it together. Merchant Oswald laughed. You really do enjoy unusual ideas. Cedric shrugged. Good ideas don't care who thinks of them. The first discussion involved a bridge. One farmer suggested building a wooden bridge across a small river to shorten travel between fields. Instead of answering immediately, Cedric looked around the table. What do you think? The council debated. The carpenter discussed construction. The merchant explained trade benefits. The hunters considered safety. The healer mentioned easier access to patients. Finally, everyone agreed. Cedric smiled. Then it's approved. The council members exchanged surprised glances. That's all. Cedric nodded. Why should I ignore everyone's expertise? During the following weeks, the council solved dozens of problems. The marketplace expanded. School hours were adjusted. New farming schedules prevented irrigation disputes. Hunters organized safer patrol routes. Cedric noticed something remarkable. He was making fewer decisions. Yet Ashfall was improving faster than ever. One snowy afternoon, a young boy quietly approached the council hall. He nervously dropped a folded piece of paper into the suggestion box. Later that evening, Cedric opened it. The childish handwriting read, "Can we build a playground?" The room became silent. Captain Gareth scratched his head. A playground. Teacher Elena smiled. The children deserve one. The council unanimously approved the idea. Cedric laughed. Our first suggestion came from a child. Construction began the following week. Simple wooden swings, a climbing frame, benches beneath large trees. When the children saw it finished, their laughter echoed across the town. Cedric watched from nearby. Alfred smiled. My lord, that might be the cheapest project we've ever completed. Cedric nodded. And possibly the most valuable. That night, Cedric updated Ashfall's development journal. A strong town needs more than one leader. Listen before deciding. Let experts solve expert problems. Every voice has value. Good ideas can come from anyone. A community grows stronger together. He gently closed the journal. Outside, snowflakes drifted quietly over Ashfall town. Warm lights glowed from homes. The marketplace slowly closed for the evening. Children still laughed in the new playground despite the cold. Cedric smiled to himself. I thought building roads made a civilization. He looked toward the brightly lit council hall. But maybe, building trust matters even more. Far beyond Ashfall, the kingdom still viewed it as a remote frontier settlement. They had no idea that in the forgotten wasteland, a new kind of town was quietly being born. One where prosperity was built not by the command of a single lord, but by the wisdom of an entire community. Chapter 20, The Lord Who Didn't Want to Be Famous. The last snow of winter slowly melted. Clear streams flowed once more through Ashfall town. The roads bustled with merchants. Children hurried toward the school each morning. Smoke rose from workshops before sunrise. Life had become ordinary. Exactly the kind of life Cedric had always wanted. Or so he thought. One peaceful morning, Cedric sat in the manor garden, enjoying tea. He leaned back in his chair with a satisfied smile. No emergencies. No monster attacks. No paperwork. This is retirement. He closed his eyes. Knock, knock, knock. My lord. Alfred hurried into the garden carrying several letters. Cedric sighed. I spoke too soon. The first letter came from Merchant Oswald. Demand for Ashfall grain has doubled. Cedric nodded. Good news. The second letter arrived from a nearby village. Please teach us how you restored your farmland. Cedric smiled. We'll send instructors. The third letter made him freeze. It bore the royal seal. Why is the palace writing to me? He slowly opened it. Inside was a formal invitation. By order of His Majesty, Lord Cedric Valmont of Ashfall is invited to attend the Royal Spring Assembly in the capital. The garden fell silent. Cedric stared blankly at the letter. No. Alfred blinked. My lord, I escaped the capital. I'm not going back. Meanwhile, far away in the capital, the nobles discussed the latest trade reports. One noble frowned. Ashfall. I thought that territory was abandoned. Another replied. It was. But apparently, it has become one of the fastest growing frontier towns. A minister added. The taxes arriving from Ashfall have tripled. Someone else laughed. The 12th son. The one who abandoned the succession. The room gradually became quiet. No one laughed after reading the reports. Because the numbers were real. Back in Ashfall, Cedric called the council together. He held up the royal invitation. I have bad news. Captain Gareth frowned. War. Worse. The council looked nervous. Cedric sighed dramatically. The palace wants me to attend a royal gathering. Merchant Oswald chuckled. My lord, that's an honor. Cedric looked horrified. That's paperwork. The council burst into laughter. Village Chief Bernard smiled. You'll have to go. Cedric groaned. I know, but I don't want attention. Teacher Elena tilted her head. My lord, I'm afraid it's too late. She pointed toward the marketplace. More merchants than ever filled the streets. Travelers openly spoke about Ashfall. Refugees continued arriving. The secret was already out. Later that afternoon, Cedric walked alone through the town. He passed the bakery, the blacksmith, the school, the clinic, the playground. Everyone greeted him warmly. Good morning, my lord. Thank you for the roads. The harvest was wonderful. The children love the school. Cedric smiled back at each of them. Then he quietly laughed. I only wanted enough money to retire peacefully. He looked around. Instead, I built a home. As sunset painted the sky orange, Cedric climbed the hill overlooking Ashfall. Months ago, this land had been silent, broken, forgotten. Now, stone roads stretched between thriving villages. Merchants entered through the gates. Smoke rose from hundreds of chimneys. The sound of laughter drifted through the evening air. Alfred quietly joined him. My lord, do you regret choosing Ashfall? Cedric looked across the town. Then slowly shook his head. No, I regret one thing. Alfred waited. Cedric smiled. I thought retirement would be easy. They both laughed. That evening, Cedric opened his journal one final time. He looked at the very first page. Goal: earn enough money to retire peacefully. He smiled. Then wrote beneath it, results after 1 year. Saved Ashfall from collapse. Restored 2 villages. Built a thriving town. Created trade routes. Established a council. Welcomed new families. Protected the forests. Achieved prosperity. He stared at the list for a long moment. Not bad. He closed the journal. Outside, the bells of Ashfall rang gently through the night. Not as a warning, but as a promise of another peaceful day. Far beyond the borders of the town, the name Ashfall had begun appearing in the conversations of nobles, merchants, scholars, and even the royal court. No one knew that the man responsible for the miracle still dreamed of nothing more than a quiet retirement. Unfortunately for Cedric, fate had very different plans. The Royal Spring Assembly awaited him. And with it, the beginning of a much larger story. End of Volume 1. Thank you for listening to II Fiction Stories. Please like, comment, share and subscribe. See you again next time.